Secrets readers, this is Carlo Larasso, editor-in-chief of Secrets of Home Theater and Fidelity. Thanks for joining us. And today we have a couple of special guests here. We have Ben Lilly of ATC loudspeakers in the UK. Now ATC stands for Acoustic Transducer Company, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Carlo.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And then we also have Leland from Lone Mountain Audio, who is the U.S. distributor of ATC. And thanks, Leland, for joining us as well.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. This video is going to be part of my review of the ATC SCM100ASLT. The more I say that, the better I get at remembering it. I wanted to maybe start with you, Ben, and maybe if you could tell me and also some of our readers maybe a little bit of a backstory about ATC, just a little bit in general about the company itself and you know how it is.
Sure. Yeah. So ATC was founded in the mid-70s by an Australian gentleman named Billy Woodman.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy Woodman headed up the company until last year, until sadly he passed away.
Oh, right.
But the company's still in the family, is now headed up by his son Will. But going back to the 70s, Billy had studied acoustics. He was an engineer. But his great love was jazz, and he was a highly accomplished piano player.
Oh,
And
cool.
At that time, he was working at Goodman's loudspeakers. We were a huge loudspeaker company based in the UK at the time, making a lot of systems, but also all their own transducers. So and whilst he was at Goodman's, he came up with a few ideas for a couple of new transducers, and one of them was really driven by his love of jazz and primarily piano.
Mm-hmm.
Piano is a very difficult instrument to reproduce.
Right.
Really big dynamic range, very wide frequency response, very fast attack, lots of harmonics.
Mm-hmm.
And he found a lot of the British loudspeakers around at the time really couldn't reproduce the scale. They were, the fidelity was great, but they didn't have the dynamic range, didn't have a scale.
Right.
Whilst in the US and in the studio world, which is probably where Billy had more experiences in the US, we had speakers that had come from cinema and from live sound, where really the opposite issue existed. They had huge dynamic range. In terms of the absolute fidelity, they did leave something. So he wanted to bring together the best, of the two. He was thinking, well, why can't we need to reproduce this piano? Then I need a loudspeaker that's capable of big dynamic range and with the fidelity. And he just identified early on that really, if we're going to do that, you need a better mid-range driver. At the low frequency side of things, you can use arrays of drive units. Mm-hmm. To achieve your goal, of course, depending on where your crossover frequency might be. At the higher frequency spectrum, he'd been working on dome tweeters whilst he was at Goodman's, and was really happy with the results you got from a soft dome tweeter. There's less energy in the high frequency range. There's not quite as much strain, but in the middle, you've got this difficult combination of higher frequencies with shorter wavelengths, where you really need to use a single part to reproduce this band if you're not going to avoid any phase errors, and also there's a lot of energy. So that really drove the design of the mid-range device. And towards the end of the 70s, he left Goodman's to realize these ideas he come up with, because at the time Goodman's didn't want to take them forward. They were going through a change. So 74 ATC was founded.
Wow, that's very cool. And ATC still has a very large presence in the professional market, correct?
Yeah, I mean, not at the very beginning. The business was purely. I say purely. I mean, there was the odd system, but 99.9% drive unit manufacturing.
Oh, strictly drive units then.
Yeah, that's where we came from through the 70s, and then into the 80s we started to manufacture the systems built around the mid-dome. But yeah, now our business is roughly 50-50. It changes slightly year to year, but we're about 50% pro. So
Hmm.
you'll find our products in some of the best studios in the world, best mastering studios, broadcast, film composers, sound designers, anywhere where people are focused on very high performance.
Hmm.
And then yeah, 50% of the business is consumer hi-fi.
So the speaker that I have for review, it's a massive active speaker system, speaker system, um, a phenomenal speaker system. Um, so at what point did sort of the active component come into the equation for you guys? Was it very early on, or was it
Yeah,
something later?
it was the late 80s.
Hmm.
So you were reviewing the SCM100. So the
Hmm.
first system we produced, but we go into the 70s, we produced a loudspeaker called the S70. So it
Hmm.
was a three-way speaker using the ATC mid, the first version of it, a 9-inch bass driver, and an inch and a quarter tweeter. The S70 evolved into the SCM50,
Hmm.
um, and then from we started manufacturing the SCM50 around 88,
Hmm.
and we made an active version almost immediately.
Wow. But this particular speaker, was it geared originally more to the pro market and then adapted into the consumer, into the hi-fi end, or um, was it just strictly conceived as a hi-fi, as a
I don't
consumer
think
hi-fi speaker?
Billy didn't really see it as so being so different.
Okay.
I think he appreciated that there were maybe differences in terms of visual design that people demanded. Although
Hmm.
in the late in the 80s there was maybe less focus on that compared to now, where some hi-fi has become very jewelry like. But
Yeah.
Billy didn't really see that a studio needed one thing and a domestic hi-fi system demanded something else. He was just focused on building what he believed to be a high performance loudspeaker that was true to the source it was reproducing,
Hmm.
and he believed it could be deployed in either area. If the
Hmm.
performance is correct, if the performance is right, then it doesn't really matter.
Interesting. Interesting.
And as time's gone on, the product lines have evolved, so that the Pro Series is a more utilitarian product,
Hmm.
workmanlike,
Right. Right.
we just
Industrial a little bit.
purely focused on the performance. Whereas for the home hi-fi market, we offer a range of veneered, painted finishes. And there's a little bit more focus put onto styling.
Oh yeah, this thing's got a gorgeous video. Holy smokes, it's dynamite. It looks like fine furniture. I mean, just the finish on it is phenomenal. Leland, actually, if I could ask you a question, I mean, I've always been a fan of active speakers in general, and I've owned a few different kinds of them. I think more audiophiles are becoming more um receptive to the idea of having active speakers. And I think sort of the time for them is kind of, this is my personal opinion, that the time for them has sort of come. I mean, how are you being the distributor here in the US? I mean, how do you are you seeing how do you see the sort of the breakdown or the acceptance of them from like the consumer end?
Certainly people with an open mind are more accepting of them.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm. Right.
the digital revolution has certainly helped that along as
Hmm.
well. So right now, the SCM40 is probably our top selling model.
Hmm.
And it seems like we're doing about 50-50 of it in passive and active.
Gotcha.
We put on a big active push. Maybe it was a little too early
Hmm.
in the game, but we're now promoting both passive and active sort of equally. And when you talk to people out there, some guys just don't want to give up their amplifiers. They don't want to give up all their cabling. They don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't want a perfect product. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think you understand the advantages of active in that. I mean, it just connects you to the music in a much
Right.
deeper, more immediate way. You really hear the transients, and you're really drawn into the music, and you hear more deeply into it. And You know,
Hmm.
you just can't do that with a passive system. You know, it's just
Yeah.
impossible. You don't have the same type of phase coherence, and you have a lot of signal loss because it's running through tons of copper all over the place. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I think
that's.
that's I think that's the key. Yeah, yeah. The best amplifier in the world doesn't undo, yeah, the
Hmm.
issues that exist within a passive crossover network. You know, you can get great results from passive speakers. You know, that's
Hmm.
but you know, but if yeah, all brand speakers could be improved if they implemented them in active form. You know, it's not just ours. It's
Right.
just philosophically they decide to, you know, go down a different path.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
so
pretty much a
we,
matter of physics. I mean, it just the way it works out. Not in
yeah,
the, I mean, any personally, I mean, any speaker I've heard that's active is just any like well-designed speaker I've heard that's active versus a well-designed passive speaker. It's the differences are just so obvious in terms of the 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 sound quality, how much better, more detailed, and more direct the sound is. And I mean, at least to me. Um, so yeah, it's no, but I get the whole concept of like people want to mix and match their stuff. They want to choose this amp, they want to choose that preamp, they want to
You
choose
know.
this wire and all that. And yeah,
And for some
that's
people, that's really what the hobby is. You
yeah,
know,
it's part of the fun of
they're
it.
hobbyists in that way.
Hmm.
and
I
that's exactly
actually
why that's exactly why we've got a range of passive products as well.
right.
You know, and the consumer can choose and make their mind up. But as you say, it's a great time. Like I said, Leland with the digital revolution, and also the types of digital products that are around. You know, and I think people are open to simplification as well. It depends. It varies country to country, market to market. But, you know, there's
Hmm.
some great streaming preamplifiers around, and you know, if you're looking for a simple but, you know, system but with exceptional performance, you can literally have a streaming preamplifier direct to a pair of active speakers, and
Right.
you could declutter. You might be able to lose three,
Yeah.
four, 5 boxes and end up with better performance.
Right. And you're
So,
done, and it's like
Yeah,
there it is.
right. Three
Yeah.
boxes
but of
and
course,
boom.
you know, if you want a big multi-box system, we've got the products to do that as well.
Right.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's best to cover it's best to cover all the bases. Nothing wrong with that, but yeah, yeah. No, always loved me a good active speaker. There's no question about it. Um, just so I understand, and maybe also for help our readers understand as well. These particular active speakers, if I'm following the way I guess if I wish I had a flow chart with me. If I'm following the way the signal enters the speaker and how it goes from entering the speaker and ultimately to the drivers. I mean, the signal goes into the speaker via an XLR cable. It then goes through the active crossover section where it's divided
Correct.
up into into the three, highs, mids, and lows, and then each is goes to its own independent amplifier. So you have three channels of amplification in the speaker, and those are tied directly to the drivers.
Correct. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, the key with active is that as opposed, you know, an active loudspeaker as opposed to a passive tri-amplified speaker. So the 100s, you've got a three-way, and of course
Hmm.
there will be readers, listeners out there with a tri-amplified three-way passive system. But yeah, the key difference is the signal flow and where the crossover network occurs. So in an active system, the crossover network is operated at line level
Hmm.
with active electronics, electronics that are capable of gain and attenuation,
Hmm.
and then feeding an independent, you know, one amplifier per drive unit. So in the case of the SCM100s, you've got a 200-watt bass amplifier, a 100-watt mid-range amplifier, and a 50-watt high frequency
Right.
amplifier, and
Right.
they're connected to the drive unit just with a short length of speaker cable.
Now, the active crossover section, is that all discrete analog components, or is the signal converted to digital in order to be manipulated before it goes to the amplification?
It's analog.
It's
Yeah,
all a discrete analog.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, fourth order Linkwitz-Riley, and then we have all pass filters at the two crossover points. That helps us to improve the phase coherency at each crossover point. That's something that's very difficult to implement in passive design.
Hmm.
And then yeah, each crossover for output feeds its own amplifier dedicated to each drive unit.
this thing is gorgeous looking and it's huge. And I know ATC basically does everything in-house, if I understand that correctly. Is that right? I mean, the driver design and manufacturing, and also the cabinet manufacturing as well, or is that done by someone else?
No, the cabinets are made by ourselves as well. So yeah, we're quite unique for a company of our size, is that everything is in house.
Bloody
So
hell.
the base drivers, we're starting with the voice coil winding. We wind all the voice coils. The voice coils are then, assembled up into each individual loudspeaker drive unit, the mid, the mids, the bass, and the high frequency. We've also got electronics department where we build all of our own amplifiers. And then it's not at this location that I'm at now, our cabinet factory. They're an hour away. But
Right.
yeah, we build our cabinets as well.
So how many for a pair of these speakers, how many man hours does it take to put a pair together? I mean,
Um,
And
never mind.
how many days is that, Ben? I mean, it's the process is not
yeah, I mean,
very
typically,
linear, right? It's
no,
a
it's not. It's running in parallel. So if depending on the model you order, I mean, if we're talking about the 100s, the big three ways you've got. So if someone orders a pair of those,
Mhm.
that comes in. Each element is broken off to a department. So we've got the amplifiers with electronics. The cabinet order goes off to the cabinet department. Drive unit order goes off to the drive unit department, and then so those three
Right.
elements are going
Or
to be getting
concurrently.
manufactured at the similar time, and then about 10 weeks later, 8 to 10 weeks later, depending on finish and how busy we are, they'll
Wow.
then all come back together, um, following testing. Each part's tested and QC'd individually, and then in final assembly they'll come together, be assembled, tested, packed, and then shipped off to wherever they need to go.
That's amazing. It's a completely handmade operation from start to
Yeah,
finish, it sounds like.
it's great having control of all of those processes, and especially the drive unit production.
Oh yeah.
Really, it's really your drive units. They're like the raw ingredients, and
Hmm.
they're probably the elements that play the biggest part in defining the sound of the finished system. So
Hmm.
making our own drive units, having control of the drive units gives us an advantage in terms of performance, but also consistency across the range.
Hmm.
If you're sourcing OEM from other drive unit manufacturers, then
Right.
if you want to go from a very small model to a very large model, you won't necessarily be able to source the parts you want from a single supplier, which then means your engineering and the materials across your product range may be mixed, and you might not be able to
Yeah.
achieve the same consistency from bottom all the way to the top end model.
So
So
so that just means you guys have complete control from top to bottom of every facet of the speaker's production and design and result, basically. Wow.
correct. Yeah.
Speaking of drive units, hold on one second.
don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, right. All right, kids. They sent along one of these. This is the mid-range driver. It's a cross section, actually. There we go. Of the mid-range driver that's found in the SCM100 ASLT. And oh, this thing looks like you could seriously hurt people with it, and it weighs as much as a small animal. This thing, it just weighs a ton, and it's on this watching this video probably can't appreciate this, but it's just like insane, the build quality of this thing. But for all the looking at it, I mean, just for the untrained eye, just for all the world, it looks like a giant soft dome tweeter in a waveguide. But this is the mid-range driver. I mean, what makes this thing so special, Ben? I mean,
There's a few key attributes. So Billy chose the dome design for the simple reason that with a dome you drive it at the diaphragm's edge.
mhm,
Uh, Now, with any device that needs to operate up into the mid and up into the higher frequency, your upper one of the things that defines your upper crossover frequency is the diameter of the part.
mhm,
So if your mid range gets too big, that's going to drive your upper crossover point down.
mhm,
Or if you don't pull that crossover point down, it means the dispersion is going to suffer. Yeah, if you can get a large drive unit to radiate high frequency, it does so in a very beamy directional fashion, which is undesirable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's desirable to keep a mid-range relatively small, keep a relatively modest diameter so that you can cross it over further up, and it's got a nice wide dispersion pattern. So going with a dome, we're going to keep that diameter small, but we also want a big voice coil diameter to make sure the power handling is high and the power compression is low. So we go for a dome. It gives us maximum voice coil diameter, and we drive it at the edge. And then you've also got a natural arch linking the top of the voice coil assembly, which is a very stable and strong shape.
Wow. It's an astonishing piece of engineering, and I mean it just
and the large motor system is it's a ceramic motor system, so that's one thing that makes it very large. But we also use short coil long gap topology in the majority of our drive units. So the more commonly found loudspeaker driver motor topology would be long coil short gap. Typically, you can get away with a smaller motor system with that topology, but when we use a short coil, that's a coil that always stays within the linear part of the magnetic field, and that gives us better linearity. You end up with a very large motor structure. Another benefit of the big motor structure is that we totally saturate the magnetic circuit, and if it's saturated, we don't get any modulation of the flux, and that reduces the third harmonic distortion, so we get better clarity.
Oh gosh, I feel like a giant cyclops with this thing. I mean, it's just unreal. It's unreal.
Yeah, that big voice coil and that huge motor system, is one of the principal reasons why the ATC three-ways sound so dynamic. Not only it's not necessarily about being able to play really loud. Not lots of people don't need to play at huge SPLs, but a lot of the clarity and life and vibrancy in music comes from the dynamic range, the contrast between the dark and the light, big crescendos, and any form of compression within the system, be it electronic, the amplifier limiting or clipping, or mechanical within the loudspeaker drive unit, say the bass driver running out of excursion, or even thermal. If the drive unit coil gets hot, the sensitivity is reduced. So if we've got a mid-range that's got very little power compression, and it's very efficient, then it really helps that the dynamic range and that life and vibrancy in the music.
It's like one of the most unique drivers I think I've ever seen, and seeing it actually out of the speaker and of the speaker itself, and just like looking at it, it's and handling it, it's an incredible piece of engineering, and it's very, very cool. And yeah, I better put it down before I like break a foot or something. So there we go. I can only imagine.
Developed in 1976, right, Ben?
Yeah, the first version, the mid. Yeah, we started making it at the end of the 70s. We didn't really start making it any sort of volume until probably early mid 80s. And then the first commercial speaker it went in was the SCM50, which is one model down from the 100 that you're reviewing. So the SCM50 was the speaker that kind of started it all for us. And from that, the range has evolved. And we make models like the 100, which can offer. Really, the goal isn't to do anything different than we achieved with the 50. It's all about a speaker that's very faithful to the original recording. You've got outstanding resolution and big dynamic range. And as you go up the range, the character of the speaker remains very, very similar. It's just capable of more extended low frequency response and more bigger scale reproduction. So it really comes down to choosing what's right for your space, your room, and your budget.
Gotcha. That's phenomenal. And like I said, I've spent some good quality time with these speakers and listening to them with a variety of material and stuff. And I mean, they're phenomenal. You guys have made something really special with these speakers. They are something else. I mean, they just sound just as clear as day. And in this room, this is a pretty large room that well, you can't see it obviously because of all the fake background, but I'm in a pretty large room, and there's a tremendous amount. They just fill it with sound and a tremendous amount of bass as well. So it's they just sound phenomenal. So well done. I mean, yeah.
Great to hear you've enjoyed them so much.
Oh yeah, very much so. I think maybe the last couple of questions. So when you guys are in sort of the final sort of voicing stage, when in speakers, do do you have a sort of a philosophy of how you voice the speakers? Do you go for like a sort of a flat target or something else? I mean, different speaker manufacturers do different things, I know, or have different philosophies. Do you guys have sort of a prevailing philosophy of how you voice speakers, or?
Yeah, the goal with all the models across the range is for a flat frequency response. So that's always the target. And we often reference back to the SCM50, that first model that we produced as the range has evolved. It's just ended up being nicely, conveniently actually in the middle of the range. So we often use that as a reference point. But
So
yeah,
sort of the touchstone then.
Exactly, yeah. But the goal is always a flat frequency response.
Interesting. Okay. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much you guys have been great. Thank you so much for your time. And that's I just kind of basically wanted to touch on those few things and really appreciate you taking the time to fill me and the readers in on the details and stuff. So we really appreciate it. All the best.
Thank you, Carl.
All right, thank you. Nice talking to you.
Great talking to you too.
Yeah,
All the best.
have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.